Before we begin, there is something very important you boys should know.
What?
We do not learn martial arts to pick fights or to impress girls who will say, "Oh, Beefcake, you're so strong, I want you." Do you understand what I am saying?
Mm-hmm.
We must master the art of peace in addition to the art of war. We achieve victory by the arts of war. Victory is won through strategy. Strategy is derived from the art of peace.
Mm-hmm.
However, if somebody evil threatens you or any other good, innocent people with unethical force, it is your duty to defend. Do you understand?
Yes! Can you repeat that?
Like many young men raised on Dragon Ball Z and Kung Fu movies, I'm a sucker for effortless badassery. Nothing got me going as a kid more than seeing Piccolo show up to rinse all the minions without even taking off the weighted training gear.
Well, well, aren't you the confident one? Another proud Namekian soon to be begging for mercy just like all the rest.
Shut the hell up.
For those of you who didn't grow up right and don't understand the reference, think John Wick. Unimposing from the outside, but if you know, you know.
You, working again?
No, just sorting some stuff out.
Oh, well. I'll leave you be then.
He's the kind of guy who throws down with the best of them, but really just wants to be left the fuck alone. Ideally somewhere pretty, you know? Like the side of a mountain or deep in some unspoiled wilderness. Right, so one definition of existential crisis I'll put to you is realizing you are failing to live up to the standards you have set for yourself. It's been a long and often unpleasant journey of self-exploration to come to terms with the fact that I am not, in fact, effortlessly badass.
Could have fooled me.
If I have an ounce of anything in me that can even approximately be called badass, it has come at enormous effort. Mostly the kind of effort you exert worrying what everybody else is thinking about you. The kind of effort that comes from being afraid that you aren't what you think you should be and desperately trying to correct that fact. In other words, being insecure. I had a wide array of role models growing up across a spectrum of physical, mental, and emotional attributes. My heroes were beings like Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. I had a little illustrated, kind of like comic book version of Journey to the West when I was a kid, and I loved that shit. To me, the idea of a supreme being who was 3 sheets to the wind and 2 middle fingers to the sky just resonated with me as a child. Some of my heroes had a sense of humor, some of them not so much. But one thing they all had in common was they weren't insecure. For better and for worse, they all seemed to know what they were about. They had that clarity of mission and purpose that I so desperately crave. So let's talk about yoga, because this is apparently a yoga channel. One of the key texts in yoga philosophy is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now, I won't get into a long-winded thing right now about the Yoga Sutras. Let's maybe save that for another day. But I will tell you what the opening passages of the sutras say, because that's, according to Patanjali, what yoga is. The opening passages of the Yoga Sutras instruct the practitioner that yoga is understood as the stilling of the disruptions or disturbances to one's conscious field of reality.
What?
There's a lot of different ways to interpret this, and I'm just providing you one, largely based on the work of a yoga scholar by the name of Nikolai Bachman. You are, as always, encouraged to consult alternative sources. The Yoga Sutras then offer the following carrot and stick for why you should practice this yoga stilling. The carrot is the promise that if you practice this stillness and can find this stillness, it will give you an ability to return to a place of pure or undiluted awareness from which you can access your supposedly higher or true self. The stick is a warning that should you fail to accomplish this, or should you neglect this practice, you will instead come to identify with the disruptions. You will come to identify with the disturbances to your conscious field of experience. So is the stick a convincing threat? Well, most people don't practice yoga, so apparently not. I think maybe more people would take this threat seriously if it was clear what exactly it means to identify with the disturbances to your conscious field of experience. It's not exactly entirely clear what the heck your conscious field of experience even is. I won't pretend to be some expert on the science of consciousness or philosophy of mind. Some translations of the Yoga Sutras describe this conscious field of experience as your, quote, mind stuff. Mind stuff encompasses all of the complex and diverse phenomena that come with being a thinking, feeling being. That can include solving a math problem, remembering an unpleasant experience, or marveling at an object of transcendent beauty. Disruptions to our mind stuff also come in many different shapes and sizes. And I think it's worth taking a moment here to say, here at the Martial Arts Yoga Academy, we don't view those disruptions as inherently bad. The thrill of watching a suspenseful movie is a disruption. The chaotic emotions involved with falling and being in love are incredibly disruptive. I think you can make the case that the shakeup you get from these experiences is kind of the whole point of having them. And a life lived without them would be no life at all. Put in another way, to find stillness is to return home. But to remain still is to never leave the house. There are a lot of things in our life that make us feel insecure. Some of these experiences are so potent, they change our entire relationship with reality itself. We go from feeling afraid to being afraid. Our mind stuff is so affected by what happened to us that it takes on an entirely new form from that point onward. This new form interacts with reality in a different way. We begin to see dangers where maybe we never used to, and we stop noticing beauty and joy in places where we used to see it. This is, I think, what it means to identify with the disruptions to our conscious field of experience. We are what we do. And now a personally relevant paradox. What if you're insecure about the fact that you're insecure? This is just restating a very old spiritual puzzle. How does one bring about the cessation of desire without desiring it? How does one become selfless if they're fundamentally motivated by selfish reasons? If you thought maybe some jujitsu bro on the internet had figured out the answer to that thousands-year-old problem, I have disappointing news for you. You cannot stop being insecure by being insecure about it. The best I can offer are the tools that I have tried to put to use when dealing with my own anxiety about the fact that I am often failing to live up to the standards I set for myself, the standards that I took from the role models I had growing up. Those tools are yoga and martial arts. If yoga is the stilling of the disturbances to one's mind stuff, Adding martial arts is about recognizing that sometimes being disturbed is the appropriate reaction. A train barreling towards you is pretty disturbing. Being still is probably not the right move. There are a whole host of things happening in the world today that disturb the ever-loving shit out of me. Retreating to some place of pseudo-spiritual detachment from all of that strikes me as an enormous cop-out and an enormous dereliction of our responsibilities to other human beings.
It is your duty to defend.
Okay, I'm being a little facetious because what is meant in the yoga tradition by stillness is really a state of mind, not the literal act of being still and not moving. That said, I think there's still a point to be made here. To be alive is to be constantly experiencing things that are disruptive, dangerous, or just adversarial to our interests in some way. And while I don't recommend coming to identify with any one of those particular disruptions or disturbances, I'm not opposed to identifying with the broader meta fact that those disruptions and disturbances are inevitable. Another way of thinking about it would be to say, if conflict is an inevitable disturbance you will experience, and yoga is a system for stilling those disturbances, then it sounds to me like a truly thought through yoga practice would have something to say about navigating conflict. Martial arts yoga attempts to do that by de-emphasizing the tension between stillness and disturbance, and instead centering the kind of eternal dance between the two. I like to think of it as anticipatory stillness. It's like, yeah, I'm still, but I'm also ready to get the fuck out of Dodge if I have to, you know? So what do we actually do on a day-to-day level to practice anticipatory stillness? What do we do as martial arts yogis? Fair question. Martial arts and yoga are distinct practices. And when trying to integrate two different practices, I think it makes sense to ask yourself first, which one are you inherently more attracted to? Or which one are you more invested in? This will give you a sense, I think, of which practice is the foundation and which is more of the supplement. Which one you're going to spend more time on and which you're just going to dabble in, at least for the time being. It's my hope that in time you will come to see this distinction fall away and recognize these two practices as two sides of the same coin. But until then, even if that doesn't happen, I think there's no problem with saying, at least for the time being, that one of your practices is the servant and the other is the master. For me, it was martial arts that pulled me into yoga. I perceived yoga as a way to develop isometric strength, flexibility, and balance. I also was attracted to the idea of something that would calm me down a little bit. Newsflash, people who want to recreationally strangle other people are people who want to strangle other people. I was discouraged to see that yoga was overwhelmingly taught by and for women. It's nothing against you ladies, but y'all don't always make the most inviting spaces for dudes at your studios, okay? Curiously, although the yoga was overwhelmingly taught by and to women, many of the revered yogis were men. The visual of a large pyramid of women all looking up to a man sitting at the top gave me, and still gives me, a lot of consternation about yoga culture in our society. That'll also probably be another video. Yeah, that'll be another video. But the aches and pains that martial arts training causes made me willing to set aside some of those concerns for the sweet relief that a yoga practice promises to provide. Joints started to move more freely, and a lot of my chronic pain issues suddenly disappeared. Lying on my back at the end of my yoga practice, I started to dip in and out of those meditative states that the sutras are talking about. That place of stillness and more undiluted awareness. I began to wonder how might my life change if I were able to access this state more readily. I began to see yoga as not just a fitness class I went to a couple times a week, but as something I could cultivate in other areas of my life, while I was cooking, driving, or just spending time with my kids. Focusing on maintaining the proper posture in a warrior pose turned out to not be so different from maintaining my full attention while playing with my kids, cooking a meal, or just trying not to get super frustrated. I got an obnoxious email from opposing counsel. If you're still with me and you're thinking to yourself now, look, dude, I'm happy you aligned your chakras or whatever, but I'm just looking for that physical stuff you promised in the beginning. I want my knees to bend without creaking. I want to be able to bend over without my back hurting. I just want to be able to move through life more easily. I get it. Physical relief was my first goal too. And it remains one of, if not the principal reason I maintain my yoga practice. And a relatively simple but consistent yoga practice can help you accomplish this in relatively short order. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that improving your isometric strength, your flexibility, or your balance are really just positive externalities associated with improving your overall mind-body connection. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to improve mind-body connection. And one of the most reliable ways of doing that is to integrate a very simple breathing practice into your training. So if you are like me and you're coming at this from a martial arts background, the prescription is very simple. You're going to start tacking on a short breathing exercise at the end of your martial arts classes. Now, you can combine this with some gentle stretching, and I would recommend you do that, but you don't have to for purposes of this exercise. The important thing is that you find a comfortable position, either on your back or sitting down, that you can relax, close your eyes, and just start taking some very deep, slow, intentional breaths. I'm fond of counting the length of my inhales and exhales, if for no other reason than to really force my brain to stay on task. You'll aim for at least 5 minutes, but I'm partial to 10 to 15 myself. A lot of that will depend on the intensity of the training session immediately preceding. If you had a really intense class, I would say give yourself at least 10 to 15 minutes. If you're relatively chilled out already, 5 is probably enough. Sparring elevates our fight or flight systems through the activation of our sympathetic nervous system. Relaxing into these meditative states flips on our parasympathetic nervous system, which brings us instead into that rest and digest state. I've done this practice with a lot of people at the gym I train at, and they all say the same thing immediately after. Wow, I feel really good now. It's really that simple. I strongly encourage people who just got done with very intense martial arts training to start baking this sort of thing into the end of their classes. You will notice the benefits very quickly. Now, if you have no connection to martial arts and you've somehow stumbled across this channel, chances are you're here either to see how this BJJ bro has completely desecrated your spiritual system, or you're a yogi with a little tickle in the back of your mind stuff to maybe get into something a little more confrontational.
Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe fuck yourself.
If it's the former, let me extend the following olive branch and say, I know. Look, I've met lots of yogis who tear up when they talk about the significance of yoga as a practice in their lives. Many of them tell harrowing tales of being on the brink of taking their own lives before they found this system that helped pull them out of that darkness. I think this is beautiful, and I would never try to take that away from anyone or ridicule them because they take it a little more seriously than I do. If I come across glib with my swearing and my jokes, it's only because my hero is still Sun Wukong with 2 middle fingers to the sky. To me, a spiritual system that cannot set aside its pious righteousness from time to time and laugh at itself does not deserve to be revered. And that's just how I feel about that, man. But supposing it's the latter, and you're here because you're thinking maybe it's time for a little less rest and digest and a little more fuck around and find out, the recommendation is also quite simple. Start training, start sparring. Before you dive into any sort of martial arts sparring, you're gonna have to decide whether or not you want to get hit in the face. If for some strange reason the answer is no, that doesn't necessarily disqualify striking arts like karate, taekwondo, or Muay Thai, but it is going to make it very difficult to integrate sparring into that practice. Working on bags and pads can allow you to access martial arts as a movement practice and still provide some of that haptic feedback that I think is so important into really embodying this system. But I strongly encourage my fellow yogis out there to experience human on human sparring, because that's really where the magic happens. Sparring is a very easy way to access this heightened state in which we can really put that whole finding stillness thing to the test. You know what I mean? So if getting hit in the noggin is a no-go for you, I would recommend seeking out the grappling systems like jiu-jitsu or wrestling. Judo is another option, but there is some impact involved with that. Finding a gym near you is just a matter of hitting up Google, seeing what's close, reading some reviews, and giving it a shot. Most places will give you a free or heavily discounted introductory class. This is your opportunity to get the vibe of the place, gauge the intensity of the training environment. Is it a more recreationally focused gym, or is it a place that's trying to churn out competitors for a professional martial arts scene? This is also your opportunity to evaluate the quality of the gym's management. Good management is reflected in cleanliness, safety, and responsiveness to students' questions. Don't be afraid to try a couple of places before you settle on one, and be leery of any gym that actively discourages cross-training at other gyms. That's basically it. Start training, start sparring, and don't forget about your breathing exercises. I can't promise that any of this is going to make you effortlessly badass, but I can promise that you will very soon find yourself responding to difficult situations quite differently. And if you're curious on how you can build out a practice from here, you can check out my website, yogaformartialarts.com, where I've got a couple additional things for you to try out. Thanks for watching. Namaste.